Hi class. So this lecture is on Excel functions. This is such a large topic that a really long video would be needed to teach um, almost all the Excel functions that are useful. So what we'll do is we'll touch upon some of the most important aspects and do the rest of it in the class. We'll go more in detail in the class and clear the doubts if you have any in the classroom. So let's start with where to find these functions. So as we had looked at before on the Excel ribbon, there's the formulas tab. So this is where most of the functions are hidden. Um, Once you get used to these functions, you don't really go here to find the functions. For example, you'll memorize them. You'll hit an equal sign and you want to find the sign of a value. You remember the formula, or you want to use the pi. You already remember the formula, but before you get that familiar with most of the commonly used formula, you could use this formula tab to find the function that you're trying to use. One feature is this guided feature, is the insert function feature. Here you could type in some text um, explaining what you're trying to look for. For example, if I'm trying to find a log function, I'll simply try searching log and see whether it shows up. Yeah, so it gives you a lot of recommendations based on that log. Um, so if I wanted something related to a text operation, um, so you'll get a lot of things that are similar to that. And for example, if I was looking for text split, this is the way I would find it. Another way is to just guess it by category. So if you know your function you're looking for is mathematics or mathematical function, you hit that category and then scroll through this to see if um, any of your functions are listed. Some of these lists would be as big as 50 to 80 or 90 functions in these categories. Math is a big category, and there are several different categories. So you have financial functions, date and time, math, statistical, lookup and reference, database, text, logical, and information. Um, for engineers, the ones that you would most commonly use are one is math and trigonometry, then statistical, lookup and reference, text, logical, information, and a little bit of engineering. Those are the most commonly used ones by engineers, at least in my experience. So most of the examples and problems we will do in class will be based on those categories. Okay, so let's look into some of these drop downs and see what are those functions. Let's go in here. Let's go into engineering, for example. I hardly ever used most of these in my career. The ones that I end up using are sometimes is decimal to hex conversion, because of what the numbers you get from uh, your electronics data, hex to decimal also. And then another one that is very useful is the conversion. So this converts units from one unit to the other. Um, Maybe we can start with that. So this is a bunch of conversions you could do in Excel. I have given you a sample Excel file. So you can convert weight, pressure, force, length, area, volume, energy, power, temperature, the usual ones that engineers care about, especially mechanical engineers. So the formula is somewhat like this. So you'll use the convert function, then you'll pick in the original value, and then put in the formula for the units of the original value, and then the final formula for um, the required converted value. So it looks something like this. So if once you hit gram here, let me delete this. I could also convert that into several similar mass units or weight units. I could convert that to ton, for example. See, so you could use this quite a lot. I use this function quite a lot, especially with temperature, you know. Um, so it's the same formula, convert and 2 units. It has one value and 2 different units. So one your existing unit and one the new unit you want to convert it to. So that's the convert function. Now, there's so many of these functions. It'll be hard to just teach them in by individual functions. So what I've done is I've created this Excel file where you have, this is not a full set of functions in Excel. This is a set of functions that are important. And I've given the description and also an example of how to use it. Okay, so you could use this as a reference. There's one for math, there's one for statistics, there's one for engineering, there's one for logical, lookup and reference, text, info. In all of these, I've highlighted the ones that I think you should be really familiar with, that once you remember that this function exists in Excel, you could use that on some of your work later on, both academic and once you graduate after here, you could still use several of these functions until Excel is replaced by some other better software. But these are really good, useful functions that could simplify most of your calculations significantly. Um, so yeah, take a look at this. Try to see how they're calculating each of them. But in general, you understand math has math functions. Statistics has a lot of statistics functions. It will have median, average, count if a number is above something, count how many times something is occurring, standard deviation, t-test, slope, intercept, forecast some values based on existing value, things like that. Engineering function, I kind of mentioned to you, there are a few that are useful. Um, Logical functions, I end up using these a lot. The if function, I've used it quite a lot, if, and or. Because based on what happens in your data, you might want to do something else. So these logical operators are used quite a lot by engineers. Lookup and reference, these are also quite significantly used. We used to use VLOOKUP quite a lot, but the latest version of Excel has XLOOKUP function and also the XMatch functions, which kind of replaces these two. Even though they're still there, I think these functions are much better. We'll discuss that in class why they're better based on um, some reference changes and how these things will still hold on to their references. And all of these functions. So these helps you look into a table and pick and choose and process the right set of data that you want within those tables. Text functions, a lot of times you want to split some data, you want to merge data, you want to select some data based on a text. All of those could be done with a lot of these text functions. So I've used concatenate a lot. I've used text join, text split, and replace quite a lot. Info function, I think the info functions have also improved with the latest version of Excel. So for example, the cell function, you can get a lot of information within the cell function. So right now I'm just asking for what is the row number of the cell. You could also ask color, contents, format, a lot of these information within that cell using that cell function. Similar one is the info. In this particular case, I'm using the info function to check the Excel version here. You have other options also. Um, so you can look for the the file directory of this file. So I've saved this file in this location, for example. Um, so you could get system information, a lot of information that could be sometimes useful. Um, there's an error type function. There's a check whether the cell is blank or not. There's a check whether there's an error in a cell or not. For example, there's an error here. If you delete that error, it goes to false. So look through this Excel file, play around with all these functions, um, ask questions if you um, find anything difficult, um, and also pay more attention to the highlighted ones. Now let's look at some examples here. So I've picked three topics here of these functions: the logical, statistics, and range lookup. Let's start with the range lookup. So in this case, we have a tabular data um, which has time, temperature, carbon monoxide concentration, humidity, and an on-off logical function where whether the dehumidifier is on or off, a ventilation fan is on or off. So it's only zeros and one here. So um, the VLOOKUP helps you to look at this column based on value in one column. So for in this case, I want to look at what is the value of water temperature, CO, humidity, all of these things at time 200. So you can always do scrolling and look at it and copy paste it. But when you're dealing with large sets of data and also when you're trying to automate things, you want a function that does that job for you. So what it looks for is it picks the whole range that's in here, and then it asks for what am I looking for? What is the reference or lookup value? So lookup value was in here, which is the time, and then which column should I return corresponding to that time value. So in this case, if you look at this whole range, the water temperature is in the second column, so it's returning the second column number from the second column. In the third one, it is returning from the third column, and so on and so forth. So if you change this to some other number, for example, 2000, we can verify whether this is correct or not. So let's go to 2000. Um, oh, I missed telling you this. So there's no 2000 number in here. So what it's going to look for is either the closest number to 2000. I don't remember whether it was going to look for the number below or above, but let's see. So what it returned is 100.3. So it picked the number below. Let's see this. So it's doing an approximate match right now, and the approximate match is the closest number, which is slightly smaller in this case, and it's picked that number because there's not really a time which is 2000. Now if you pick this and change this to exact match, like find what is the value if the time is exactly 2000, you should get an error because that number is not available. All right, so that's VLOOKUP. XLOOKUP is a little bit different, and it's the newer version. So you have to provide two ranges. Instead of a column number, you have to provide two ranges. The first one is, okay, I'm looking for this particular time and the time column is this, which is this. And I want to return the data from the water column. And then it also gives you the options what to do if not found and match mode. So the match mode is asking you whether you should pick the one above or below to the closest match. And then the search mode is, should I start searching from the top or searching from the bottom? So when it finds it first in one direction, it will stop there. So that's the XLOOKUP function. It's right now we are looking at 200. Let's put 2000. It's doing 100.3. What if we change this to +1? So it picks the value that is closer but on the higher side. See? So you can pick the higher or the lower number closer to that your search. Similar is lookup. Very similar. You can look it up. HLOOKUP is similar to VLOOKUP, where in this case you're not looking for data in columns, you're looking for data in rows. Sorry, vice versa. You're not looking for data in row, you're looking for data in a column. So you have to provide what you're looking for. In this particular case, you're looking for water temperature, which is this column, and the range is this. And you want the data from row 40 in water temperature. So starting from here, it will count 40 and it will give you the value. And you can again choose to have exact match or um, approximate match. In this case, when you're looking at searching through column headers, it's almost always advisable to have exact match. Because you're not looking at numbers. A lot of times column headers are text, and if you use approximate matches, as you can imagine, it could sometimes give weird errors. Then there's the match example, match function. So what we're trying to do is there's a time 270. So I want to match this value 270 in this column and then find the position of that number within that column. So if you look at 270, it's roughly 10 below the start of that column, and it returns the number 10. Xmatch is very similar, but it's more robust and gives you more search modes. Index function gives you so if you give it an array and hold on a second. So this is an array, and you want the row number and a column number. So if you provide a row number and a column number within that index, it'll give you the number in that row. So you provided this whole range, and you're looking at the second column, which is the time column. And in the time column, you want row number 10. So row number 10, it'll give you number 270. Indirect function, so it just gives you the value on a particular inside a particular cell. So if you said what is inside cell number F44, use the indirect function. In this case, F44 is 1080. So it gives you what is that value inside that indirect function. A lot of these may not make sense for you on how these will be useful, but when we do some examples and assignments in class, you will realize how important these functions are, especially when combined with average function, etc., sum function, etc. Okay, that's a range lookup. Now let's go into an example with statistics. So here, typically in statistics, you have a lot of measurements of similar type and there's something varying. So in this case, I'm imagining there's somebody in a factory somewhere measuring the bore diameter of a cylinder. Um, and usually they do that to match with the piston. And if the diameters are not within spec, they're not useful. So in this particular case, all this is imaginary. Um, the minimum allowed number is 49.3 mm and maximum is 50 mm. So if it is outside of this range, it's a bad part. So you have this data in this case. I don't know how many values, probably thousands of values from some factory somewhere. Uh, and then you have to figure out what does this data look like. First thing is what is the average, So what is the average of our data? That's a simple function. Okay, so average is already looking kind of problematic. It's above the max allowed. So the data seems like it is really on the high side of the range. We could do a standard deviation of the sample. Again, you could go in here to find these functions, but um, once you start using functions a lot, you will just type in there. So that's the sample standard deviation. A lot of times you could calculate a lot of these things. I'm just going to do a min and a max. Um, if you want to calculate how many samples you have without scrolling down, you could just do that. So you have 1,000 samples. Now, how many samples are on the low side or lower than the minimum allowed? So here we use the count if function. So this is the range, and if this range, the values are lower than 49.3, we need to count them. So the syntax for that is you have to put in the colons, or sorry, and here you have to put in an ampersand and then select this number, close the parentheses. So that's how many that are lower than 49.3. To see how many are higher, we'll just reverse the sign. Then 50. Okay, so this many failures. Okay, so how many pass? This minus this plus this. So pass. So what is the process yield? How many passed? 39.8% passed. So this is some of the basic ways you will do, you know, a statistical analysis. Of course, this is very simple what I'm showing here. You do a lot more analysis than this to get into the details of the process, figuring out the problem and how to fix it. So clearly this factory has a problem. If your process yield is 39.8, it needs to be in the high 90s. Anyway, another thing to note here is in formulas, there is something called trace precedence and trace dependence. What that tells you is there are no dependents for this cell. Okay, so if I delete this, it doesn't affect any other cell. On the other hand, what about precedence? So these cells are affecting this cell. Okay, so if I delete this, it has an effect on it. So this is something you could use to figure out what cell is connected, which cell is talking to which cell, you know, and you can hit remove errors. Um, let's figure out trace dependence. So yeah, the cell depends on this. Okay, so that's the statistics function. Let's go into logical functions. Okay, in this data set, I know we haven't started the charts and plots, but this is just to visually explain what's going on in here. Suppose we have another data set and we have time, we have a signal that is coming 1 or 0, and then we are continuously doing a measurement. We are only interested in the measurement. In one case, we are only interested in the measurement if the signal is greater than 0. In another case, we're only interested in the measurement if the signal is 0. How do we do that logically? So that's where we use the logical function. In this case, the if function. So if you use if signal greater than 0, then pick the value in the measurement column. Otherwise, output 0. That's essentially what that's saying. And then drag that formula down. In this case, it's doing the opposite. If it is 0, pick the value, else give the number 0. And this is just plotted in here. Okay. So you can see this plot is a signal function, the blue. So whenever the blue is happening, the red is captured. That is the measurement if A greater than 0. Whenever the blue is 0, that's when the blue is working. So this is a simple explanation or simple logical function explained. Um, we'll do more involved ones in the class. All right. So those suffices the 3 examples, and I think this concludes our lecture on functions. We'll learn more in the classroom. Thank you for now. Bye.